Members of the royal family were among the thousands in northern France over the weekend. Prince Charles paid tribute to the Canadians who fought and took Vimy Ridge 100 years ago. Earlier in the week, he was at the Vatican meeting Pope Francis, and today he's in rural England visiting a charity and a cheese-making business. Millions around the world follow these little glimpses into the life of Prince Charles, the future king. But behind the headline speeches and photographs is a more complicated story. My next guest investigates the man who may be king. Sally Bedell Smith is the author of Prince Charles, The Passions and Paradoxes of an Improbable Life. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
We say maybe king. He's going to be king.
He will be king.
There's no doubt.
He will be king. He's had the longest wait, definitely, of anybody in British history, in the 1,000-year history of the monarchy. But he's ready. He will not have, obviously, as long a reign as his mother, who is 65 years and counting on the throne. But the big surprise to me was the amazing legacy he will leave as Prince of Wales, the role he created for himself along the way, kind of almost improvisational, the range of his projects and enterprises. He's a charitable entrepreneur.
And do you think that his character was shaped by knowing that he would someday be king, or did he do it as his own person, as Prince Charles, and following his own passions and interests?
It was definitely the latter. He didn't know how long he'd wait, but he figured he was going to. His mother took the throne at age 25. No, it completely followed his passions. The first big charity he did when he left the Royal Navy in 1976 was the Prince's Trust, which has helped some 800,000 young people with seed money, including Idris Elba, one of the stars of The Wire. Mm-hmm. So he's, and I met actually Justin Trudeau for the first time when he met Prince Charles at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Malta in 2015, when Justin Trudeau went to the reception for the expansion of the Prince's Trust into a more international organization. So Prince Charles has made a real impact, and he, of course, loves Canada. He's been here 16 times and speaks of his affection and is colonel-in-chief of a lot of regiments.
You were telling me it took 4 years to put this book together. Was it difficult to find people to talk about Charles and then have to lace it all together and come up with his life story?
The lacing it together is the harder part, but I had written books about Diana, Princess of Wales, and about Her Majesty the Queen, so I knew a lot of people who knew Prince Charles well. I had, I guess, it's not a totally authorized book, but I had access to many of his senior advisors, and I had lots of other people I knew, everyone from architects to spiritual gurus to artists, to people who had been helped by his charities. And I felt that I was able to that was the challenge, was kind of getting my arms around this sprawling life and tracing the threads of his thinking. When you were talking about coral reefs earlier, he gave his first environmental speech in 1970, and it is an amazing preview of the issues which he became a champion, including a great advocate for combating climate change.
And you mentioned Diana. People are still to this day fascinated with that relationship, with that marriage, the failure of it. What did you learn in your research about the two of them and why it didn't work?
Well, I think it worked because there was such a huge chasm between them. First of all, they didn't know each other. To my astonishment, they'd only been together 12 times before he proposed, and only a few times by themselves. But he was under huge pressure to get married. He was 31. He'd already told the world he had to be married by 30. And he needed to produce an heir, obviously, and he'd gone through a lot of flings through the 1970s when he was the action man heartthrob. And Diana came along, and she looked good on paper. She was from a grand aristocratic family. She was sweet. She was wonderful with children.
And she just looked good, period.
She was beautiful. And he thought he could fall in love with her. But, of course, behind all this is that he had been in love with Camilla Parker Bowles since he first met her in a friend's apartment in 1972. And they had a romance before he met Diana. And then 5 years after He was married to Diana. He resumed with Camilla when, as he said on television, the marriage had irretrievably broken down. But it was really on the rocks even before they walked down the aisle in St. Paul's, which was very sad.
And now we have his children making the headlines.
Yes.
How do you think the prince feels about that? Some might say at times he's overshadowed by his own children.
Well, I think that has been sort of the fundamental dilemma of his life. He was overshadowed by Diana. He's overshadowed by this much beloved mother of his, and now these sons who have captured the public imagination and are doing very good work. But they have a wonderful relationship. He was brought up in a very tough way by his father, and Charles was a very sensitive and vulnerable little boy. Charles has given William and Harry much more latitude to figure things out, to go to the schools they wanted to do near Windsor Castle, where they also developed a great relationship with their grandmother, the Queen, who's had an enormous influence on them. So he's been a really good father, was sort of overshadowed, I think, during the Diana years. But he's let them do what they wanted to do, to pick their own very experienced advisors and to develop their own philanthropies.
Fascinating. I feel like you're going to have a few more chapters to add at some point to this. Prince Charles biographer Sally Bedell Smith, appreciate your time with us today.
Thanks so much.